Recently, I reached 23,071 subscribers, which, as any YouTuber will tell you, is one of the three big milestones in a channel's lifespan. You've got 63, you've got 23,071, and of course you've got a million. So we're already halfway there. We're already halfway to a million subscribers. I thought it would be fun to celebrate that with a wee Q&A, but at the same time I also needed to kind of keep people abreast of how things have been going this year. You may have noticed the channel's been fairly quiet this year. Shamey, what's the difference? It's been quieter than I would have liked it this year, so I thought I would take the opportunity to have a laugh, to blow off some steam at the end of a difficult year, and keep you all up to date. So I'm sitting here, I've got the nice cherry vanilla scented candles, I've got a mug of tea, I've got a nice cozy holiday spirit going on, so let's sit down, let's just hash it out, let's have a wee chat. I don't know, stick this on in the background while you're doing the dishes or something, because all it's really going to be footage-wise is just me gunning at a camera for probably around like half an hour or so. Is that something you want to watch? Maybe not. If not, like, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, I'll see you next time. I shouldn't keep the spoon in there because just bonk my glasses with it. First things first, I would like to apologise. If you've been watching or rewatching many of the videos on the channel these past few months, you might have noticed a bit of an uptick in the number of adverts on those videos. I find adverts kind of annoying, so that isn't ideal, but unfortunately at the minute they're kind of a necessary evil. When I stabilise, like whether that be because the channel really takes off or because just my life situation stabilises in general, then I will definitely go back and tone those down. For the minute, the most severe video, I think, in terms of adverts is the Omega Ruby one, which has one every half hour, which I think is reasonable. That sounds reasonable, but again, like, if you disagree, I'm sorry about that. Like I say, kind of needed at the minute. Speaking of making something of this channel, if you didn't know, I have a Patreon. It's currently sitting, I think, just over $250, which means we've hit our first major milestone, which is that I'm going to do another Sonic the Hedgehog marathon. Which you might be saying, Shamey, how the fuck have you got more to say about Sonic the bloody Hedgehog? Listen, because I'm a sad sack, okay? That's the reason. But no, I don't think anybody, including myself in that 4.5 hour series that I did, has really plumbed the depths of how mental that series can get sometimes. And I'd really like to do that. I think that would be a really, really fun thing to do. So yeah, if you would like to support the channel, the Patreon is the best way to do it. I also have a Twitch channel, which I'm going to leave a link to there. I'm going to assume that I left a link to the Patreon up there. But I've got a Twitch channel, which I'm going to leave there. If you would like to see the occasional stream or anything, please visit that. I was streaming on YouTube for a little while, but then I thought, you know what? Twitch is actually kind of better for it. And also, if you just want to see the proper, like, edited, scripted videos, then I'm not clogging up your timeline with streams. I can just do them whenever I want, you know? And the third thing I have a Discord, which I'll put a link to there. All the links will also be in the description. It's a chill place. We recently did a game night for the first time, and it was an amazing laugh. I had a great time. So hopefully there'll be more of that on the horizon. But yeah, Patreon, Twitch, Discord. If you're interested in any of that, I'm not going to belittle you by giving you more information. Like that's where they are. If you're not interested in any of that, just ignore it all. Anyway, so on to the kind of serious, whole-faced portion of this presentation. So you might be wondering, Shamey, where have you been? You know, what's been happening? What's been going on? You may also have noticed, Shamey, you're looking good. You've lost a wee bit of weight since the last time we saw you. Yeah, that's because of the anxiety and depression. That's that's what that is, and that's also why I haven't been uploading nearly as much. My dad was coming up and he was like, "Oh, you've lost a lot of weight. You've lost a lot of weight," and I was like, yeah, it's because I've been really, really anxious lately." And he's like, "Aye, but it's a good thing. You better, like, you maybe think about keeping that weight off." And I'm like, "Dad, I love you, but that's not really that. I'd rather be chubby and happy than skinny and anxious." To his credit, he did text me back later that evening, being like, "Yeah, I appreciate maybe it was a bit awkward of a thing to say." But yes, sorry, that was a ramble because I'm anxious about talking about my anxiety. Funny how that works. Tying into that, my living situation was a wee bit up in the air this year. Nothing drastic, nothing dreadful, no problem at all. I'm absolutely fine. But just basically, long story short, I had to move house. And what was supposed to be like just literally a weekend job moving down the road turned into like 3 months. 3 months? No, sorry, 3 weeks to a month of just getting like daily emails back and forth with the letting agency. Big one for me there. I'll spare you the details of the entire story, but the big one for me there was going into the bathroom and lifting the cistern, which isn't really something that you do while you're looking around a flat, especially not when the tenant's still in there while you're looking. But yeah, just lifting the cistern and just the whiff of raw sewage hitting your nostrils. That was kind of a moment where I was like, right, okay, there's something a wee bit wrong here. So anyway, that's it sorted. That's us moved in. That's us settled. But yeah, that took up a lot of time and energy. It's been a fuck of a year for all of us. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. I'm not going to explain why. You know why. But for me personally, it has seen a massive spike in anxiety and depression just for lots of different reasons. And it all kind of culminated in this moment the other day where I was in the car driving to Tesco and I was sitting there like, yeah, it's weird because like those few months that I was on antidepressants, I was probably the most productive I've ever been. And then it was just like a pause and I was like, oh, here, hold on a minute. There's a lot of mental traps that they warn you about, but I always thought, oh, I'm not going to get caught out by that. I'm going to be real with myself. No, I fell headlong into each and every one of them. This isn't me looking for pity. I'm going to be absolutely fine. I am nowhere near depressed or anxious enough to do myself any harm. I've been dealing with it for a while. I know what I'm doing here and I know what the solution is. It's to phone the bloody doctor, say to him, listen, going to need to discuss different medication. It's also looking after myself in terms of my sleep schedule and everything, which is, again, difficult to do when you're depressed. But yeah, just to bottom line it, I'm fine. I'm going to be absolutely fine. But I also want you to know that it's not an excuse. I want people to support me because of the quality of my videos. And if I want to convince people that I am worth supporting, then that means I'm going to have to release more videos, you know? So like I say, this isn't me looking for pity. I just want you to know that I have been working consistently on videos, but I need to channel that energy more productively so that my channel reflects that effort. Work smarter, not harder, I believe is the phrase. But yeah, I just want to reiterate my dedication to this. There are changes that need to be made, both to my lifestyle and to my work ethic. But yeah, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not quitting this just yet. I know me, and the only way that I would actually quit this, like, I know in the way that my brain works, the only way that I would actually quit this is if it was a planned thing rather than just me losing momentum, because that's just the way that I work. There would need to be a big blowout extravaganza so that I could underline it and say, that's that done, happy with that, moving on. More videos next year, that's the bottom line there. Anyway, that ends the serious portion of this. What the fuck was that? That ends the serious portion of this presentation. So now on to the fun, stupid Q&A. I asked people on Patreon and Twitter and YouTube for some questions, and I will endeavour to answer them in a way that I hope is... You know what a fucking Q&A is? I don't know why I'm needing to explain this to you. I will say, before we start, if your question isn't here, I'm sorry. Like, I read all the questions and I tried to think of an interesting answer for all of them, but unfortunately there were some that I was just like, I'm drawing a blank here. Especially stuff like, if you ever ask me what a top 10 is, I think, oh fuck, I've only played like if somebody goes, what's your top 10 video games? My brain immediately goes, Shamey, you've only played like 3 video games in your entire life. Yuri Stevens asks, will you ever do an in-depth video about another Pokemon game? That 7-hour ORAS video was really fun and relaxing. Thank you very much, both for that compliment and for that question, because it gives me an opportunity to explain what I've been working on for the past few months since the Animal Crossing video. The answer is yes. The video that I have been working on since finishing the Animal Crossing video is an exhaustive look at Pokemon Moon. Now, recording this thing has been an absolute bastardy, boy. It has been just a nightmare. It's so many... everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong, including a playthrough where I got halfway through the game and then looked back at the footage, which is, it's a bad way to be. I know, I should check it after every single recording. But yeah, the entire right-hand side of the top screen and the bottom half of the bottom screen had been completely cut off. I had a shiny Yungoos in that playthrough and everything. I was devastated. So yeah, I started that playthrough again. I was going through it. It was going really, really well. A lot better than the playthrough that I lost. So, it took some time, but it was a happy little thing. And then about a week ago, 3DS went fuck. I got in touch with Merky, who's the proverbial last man standing in the field of 3DS modification. And he said that he had encountered that problem a few times before, and he doesn't offer a repair service for it anymore because it wasn't one of his boards. It was a Katsukity board. And basically, the pins, apparently, that are around about here aren't connecting properly to the board. And so what will happen is I'm sitting there, I'm recording, and if I'm lucky, I'll make it 10 minutes with just the audio stuttering every so often, but I've never managed to make it more than 10 minutes without the video feed completely cutting out and it's saying no valid data. Of course, that's untenable, that's not ideal. Sorry, I just had a Windows Defender somebody pop up there. Nae threats, nae viruses, I am squeaky clean. So, that put a crimp in plans. And of course, with Christmas coming up, it's not exactly like I was ready to splash all that money on a replacement, which are apparently in dwindling supply as it is. But yeah, I'm not giving up on this. I'm not giving up on half a year's worth of bloody work. I have 2 options. The first one that I'm pursuing just now is getting a replacement for it, which I would prefer because it just means that everything is hardwired and a little bit more reliable. But there are other options. The second one that I think I would probably pursue is hacking my 3DS so that I can stream it to the monitor. Fingers crossed that would work. Or I guess in a worst case scenario, I could give an emulator a go and transfer my save file to that, which is less than ideal. I really would like to do this as authentically as possible. But like I say, I'm not sure if this is the sunk cost fallacy or not, but yeah, I'm determined to keep going with it. As soon as I can get a replacement sorted out, it will carry on. Yeah, fingers crossed. But yes, the plan is to do another in-depth review of a Pokemon game. Critical Link asks, 1. Without giving away too much of your thoughts on Pokemon Generation 7, I'm curious how you like it compared to the other mainline titles. It's a difficult one, because honestly, after the Pokemon Omega Ruby video, I honestly thought to myself, there's no way I'm going to have anything more to say about a Pokemon game. Like, that's it. That's going to be my final word in the matter. And then, like, a year later, or something like that, I decided, for a laugh, to stream a blind playthrough of Pokemon Moon. And what I found was that I was actually really impressed with it. And after a few play sessions, I was like, oh, okay, I might have been wrong before. I might have a lot more to say about this series, or this game in particular, at least. because I think it does a lot of really, really clever things. I think it makes it so many smart decisions that really address a lot of the problems. So honestly, I would put it somewhere near the top. Except for the fact that it also just spends the whole time with an Uzi aimed squarely at its own foot, because it's like I'm not going to spoil too much of the video by telling you that the tutorials are just insane. Like, there are so many of them, and they are not at all necessary. It's like you've walked down a path, and it's like, again, it's like, not going to go too far into it, but again, it's like, the level design is so good. It's so well designed, and then the game just stops you at every point and goes, now hang on a minute, we're going to get you to walk down that path. And you're like, yeah, I know, it's the only path I can go down. It's like, yeah, but wait. Now here's Professor Kukui. He's going to tell you to walk down that path as well. And now here's Lily, and she's going to tell you to walk down that path. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not spoiling too much of the video by telling you that, because I'm going to try and have something more articulate and insightful to say at that point. But yeah, man, it's weird, because I think were it not for all that detritus, it would be somewhere near the top. But as it is, I think it's floating around somewhere around the middle. Have you gotten the chance to play Subnautica? I feel like it's a must-play for anyone that likes Metroid Prime. I remember you recommending this to me in the Discord, and I'd really like to play it. It looks really interesting, but the problem is, just now, I'm trying to curb games and stuff that make me anxious, and Subnautica, big underwater spaces. Oof, no, couldn't do that just now. If you had to, no opting out, erase a video game from ever having existed, what would it be and why? So, an enlightened stance would be that every video game is valuable. Every single game, no matter how good or bad it is, has a place in the annals of gaming history, as it were. Even leaving aside the games that have like just missed potential or like are poorly executed but have some really good ideas, and all this, even just looking at the games that are complete irredeemable dog shit, those can still be instructive, I think. Those can still be informative, even if it's to kind of give you a look into like a particular outlook or a particular like frame of mind or frame of reference, or like even just as a time capsule of a developer's skill at that moment, or things like that. You know, I think there is value in even the worst game imaginable. So, having said all that, it's Metroid Other M. If you could forget your memories of a game just so you could re-experience it for the first time, what would it be? Ghost Trick. Absolutely Ghost Trick. I'm trying to give more of an answer than that without spoiling it, but yeah, like just Ghost Trick. Going through that game and the sheer wonder of the mystery of Sissel's identity, it's just it's great. It's perfect. I love it so much. Big Money Carmen asks, how long did it take you to make the Omega Ruby video? It was about a year's worth of work, kind of on and off. There was some procrastination in there. There was a few crises of confidence in there. But yeah, about a year. Charlotte asks, aside from the correction in the pinned comment on the Omega Ruby video, is there anything else about the game you wish you had gone over but didn't have the time, or that you just overlooked while making it? Yeah, I discovered the other day that Evergrande City's theme is a remix of Route 104, which would have been both the perfect opportunity for a wee bit of analysis on that and an opportunity to bring back the Route 104 theme for an encore. I'm kicking myself that I didn't realise that at the time. Context Sensitive asks, what inspired you to do a 7-hour video about Pokemon in the first place? How did the idea come to you? When did you decide to go all out for the length and depth? And so on. In November 2016, I got my degree, and it was a master's degree in comics studies. So as you can imagine, not exactly the widest breadth of job opportunities there. Not to say that I regret it, not to say that I didn't enjoy it, but the fact is that if people are looking to hire a comic writer or artist or editor, they're not looking for a degree, they're looking for experience, they're looking for other stuff that you have made. So after that, and after not getting any jobs despite numerous applications, despite not getting a job at basically the only game in town when it came to kind of like comics publication, I was in a bit of a mire. I was in a bit of a depressive rut, and just had the manic idea. What if I did a video where I just talked about fucking everything in Omega Ruby? Just everything. Just the whole damn game. Just everything I can possibly think of. And I thought, that'd be stupid as fuck, and it would be funny. I should do it. And I honestly thought that it was going to take maybe a couple of hours tops. I'm really bad at gauging the length of these things. Like, QED just now, this thing is currently saying like 37 minutes when I'm not even anywhere near close to done with these questions here. But yeah, it's not that I set out to make a 7-hour video, it's that I set out to say everything I could about Omega Ruby, and it just ended up being 7 hours. It's one of those things that's like, I really should not have done that. It's a really stupid idea, but it's like, I don't regret it for a second. Context Sensitive and Vibe Master also want to know, what are my top 3 games and why? Okay, so this is subject to change, like, depending on like the time of day. So don't take this as gospel or anything. Don't update the Shame wiki just yet. Number 1 is Metroid Fusion. That's pretty much the only one that is indelibly in the top spot. I don't want to go too far into why, both because I intend to go further into it in a video, but also because I can sit here and I can justify myself to you, but I'm not sure if I've like made the justification to justify it being my favourite, or if it's my favourite because it had all those reasons it took me a while to articulate. You know, I'm not chicken and an egg situation here. I'm not really sure which came first. Either way, you can put a large amount of it down to nostalgia. It's Metroid Fusion, top spot. Number 2 is The Wonderful 101. I'm probably not going to talk too much about that just now, because I know for a fact that The Wonderful 101 is going to come up later, but Wonderful 101, man, like, that is the greatest action game ever made, in my opinion, and it's sort of not even close. And I know that's going to annoy a few of you. I know a lot of you are going to be, you are talking shite here, mate, but there's your hook. There's your hook to keep watching this video. I'm not even going to put adverts on it. Just, don't know. I'm just teasing you. I'm just teasing you for no reason. Number 3, and there's going to be a certain contingent of people that this is really going to annoy, but it might actually just be StarCraft 2. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, Shame, Brood War is so much better, it is so much tighter in pretty much every way. And I don't disagree with you, but like, StarCraft 2 is just this absolutely mad fucking like roller coaster of a game. I know that's a cliched way to describe it, but it really is. Like, it is a game. It is a game, and I won't spoil anything, but there is a scene in that game where I was on the verge of tears. I was threatening to cry at this scene. I was sitting there like, oh god, no, oh man, no. Can't believe it. Can't believe this character I really like. Oh no, can't believe it. And then like literally split second afterwards, I was pissing myself laughing. I was absolutely in tears. It is a game that goes so hard on all of its ideas that it is a complete mess. Like, every single one of its ideas is this absolute, like, holy shit, this is going to be the coolest thing ever. And it goes beyond cool, back round into ridiculous, back round into cool again. And I can't help but love that, man. I can't help but, like, kind of stand in the corner of a game that makes me feel like those emotions, even if it's not intentionally, the fact that it managed to make me feel those emotions so intensely that's a top spot game for me for sure. Finally, Context Sensitive asks, What's it like having such a mesmerising accent to listen to? I love your voice. I turn on the Pokemon vid now and again just because it's nice background noise. I appreciate it, mate. But what's it like? Honestly, it's a wee bit more difficult than you might assume. Now, full disclosure, I actually have some notes taken about this just because I saw this question. I was like, oh, I have to jot down my thoughts just now. So if you see me glancing down, that's what I'm looking at. But I often have to completely re-record scripts from scratch because I'm not happy with their intelligibility. Like, this is me this isn't me talking completely normally. Like, if I'm talking completely normally to someone, I'm often, like, talking much, much faster like this, and I'm often slurring my speech a lot more, which to somebody in Scotland is perfectly intelligible, but if you are not familiar with the accent, if you're not familiar with all the strange little idioms and words and phrases that I cut my speech with, like canny and will nae and have nae instead of cannot, will not, have not, that's going to be difficult for you to parse, and God help you if you are not a native English speaker. And it's weird because I kind of have to strike a balance between using what I consider to be like my normal voice, my actual voice, because that's the voice that I want to use, and also making myself intelligible to a broad audience. When I was in Edinburgh for a few years, this was actually something I struggled with because I was in Edinburgh, I was doing an English degree, there were a lot of people from all over the world that I was interacting with, and I basically had to can my regular talking voice for the longest time because I had to talk more like this to make sure that I was understood consistently. And that may sound like a completely indiscernible change to you, but to me it's night and day. It's weird, it's a weird one. The other weird thing about it is, and sorry, I suspect you probably weren't looking for like a big, like long analysis rant on this, but that's what you're getting. The fact is my voice isn't really something that I put much thought into anymore, because it's just my voice and it's fairly normal where I come from. You know, it's people in Scotland aren't saying, oh, you've got a strange accent, because that's the accent that a lot of people where I live have. The only real difference is, of course, that I roll my R's slightly more, but that isn't actually an accent thing, that is a speech impediment based on how I learned to speak. I basically have the option of exaggerating all of my R's, or they end up as W's. You know, it's called roticism, I believe. But yeah, I have the option here of talking like Dr. Robotnik or Jonathan Ross, and given the option of Jonathan Ross or Long John Baldry, I know which one I'm bloody going to choose. I don't know, it's a weird one for me, because for the longest time I had a really big chip on my shoulder about like my accent and the way that my accent was perceived. Because it feels a little hollow, because it feels like Scottish accents are often commodified, when besides just having a different dialect being a thing that happens, there's actually a strong cultural reason that Scots tend to speak and type with a dialect. Historically, it's been a way to reclaim or like cling to an identity that had been overwritten by the English. I mean, this is why Rabbie Burns, unquestionably the greatest Scots poet, said "wee sleekit cowrin timorous beastie" rather than, you know, scared little mouse. You know, it was a way for him to reconnect with kind of a Scottish identity. That's why he wrote "to a haggis" and not like "to a lobster thermidor." I don't think lobster thermidor is English. Fucking "to a clam chowder." I say that like the Scots accent is often commodified, and the best example that I can give you is I remember a fella who seemed to want nothing to do with me otherwise, insisting I talk in a Discord call for the express purpose of imitating my accent for a D&D session, which isn't anywhere near the compliment you might think it is. It's also, of course, that every second day I'm getting comments comparing me to Shrek, or to the Scotsman for Samurai Jack, or to, God forbid, the Scottish Pokemon trainer, none of which are remotely accurate Scottish accents. I mean, I could be wrong here. I haven't done my due diligence on this, but I've lived in Scotland all my life and I've never heard any Scot say fockin, like Fockin. Usually we say fucking over here with a U. Fockin sounds more like either an Irish thing or a Northern English thing. So it's weird having all of these, like, Scottish Pokemon trainer comics shared around where it's this really weird approximation of Scots that actually sounds more English than anything. And not to slag off the English, fuck man, I'm not saying that any of this is problematic or slagging off the English with any of this. The reason that Scotland is tied to England in the first place is actually just because we were so shit at colonisation. But it's just, it's weird because it's my voice, and it's weird having my voice, what I consider to be demonstrably an authentic Scottish accent compared to all these really weird cartoonish imitations. Now, none of this is to slag you off, of course, because I think the best thing to do about this situation is just to grow a thicker skin and have a laugh with it. Like, this is probably why I get depressed so easily. I've hardwired my brain to focus on all these little negatives, and, I don't know, fuck man. I like the Scotsman out of Samurai Jack. Zinful Dreams asks, do you have any retrospective thoughts on that Brexit video you uploaded last year? It seems to be the only time your channel really delved into politics or anything that isn't video game stuff. Do you think it was worth the time investment? Overall, I'm going to say yes. I remember speaking with a friend of mine who is also a YouTuber, albeit a far more successful one, and I'm sure they would appreciate being kept anonymous for this. But I remember them saying that they were slightly envious of me because I was able to do that. I was able to do that political video, whereas they couldn't because that was their livelihood, and they'd made their livelihood on video game content. And it is kind of a difficult position to be in because you have an audience and you want to use that platform for stuff you believe in. And yet it's such a fraught time and such a controversial time that doing so while that's your livelihoods puts you at serious risk of alienating the people that you need to please. I know we'd all love to be able to say, oh, well, you should just do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. It's not always that simple. You need money to survive, unfortunately. I'm in the kind of privileged position of not being as successful a YouTuber as my friend. And so I had the opportunity to make the kind of video that I really wanted to make at the time. And make no mistake, I really did want to make that video because a lot of my attention at the time wasn't really directed towards video games. I wasn't really thinking of many video games at the time. I had that Keru no Tami ni Kani wa Naru video almost finished, but I just had absolutely no motivation to complete it because, this election was coming up and it was hanging over me. And the thing is I think it was worth it, because it mainly for the reason, I know it probably didn't massively swing the results in any way, in any measurable way. Kind of doubtful I really changed anybody's mind. But what it did for me personally is it gave me a lot more confidence in my ability to parse these kinds of political topics. Because, for example, suffice it to say, this year hasn't gotten any better. And I remember at the beginning of the year, I remember saying they should probably just lock Britain down for a month, or 3 weeks to a month, and let it pass, and then open everything back up again. And I remember being told by an older member of my family who I consider much more knowledgeable in these subjects, no, they can't do that. They can't ruin the economy to that extent. And then a few months later, fairly recently, we were discussing it, and I remember them turning and saying to me, yeah, they should have just locked down the country for those 3 weeks at the beginning. And that's not like me saying, oh, I told you so, because this is not the time to be vindictive. But it's me saying, yes, I have I should be allowed to have some confidence in my ability to understand what's going on here. So it was really good for me in those points. It was also really good for me because once it was completed, I felt like a sense of relief. It was like, right, okay, it's out there, it's on paper, it's just out my head, and I felt a lot more relaxed about it. However, I decided to make that video like a month before the election. That was not a good idea because that was a month where like I spent my every waking second just absolutely pouring into this. And even then, I was only able to make the deadline by like a day. Although, admittedly, it would have been 2 days if Premiere hadn't fucked up. But yeah, God, that was a stressful month, and I burned myself out for a good couple of months afterwards. So, overall, I would say it's worth it. But if I ever do something like that again, I think it probably should be on maybe a less timely topic or something with a wee bit more planning and foresight, to say the least. How do you feel about being seen as a 7-hour Omega Ruby video guy? Is that a reputation you're a fan of? I mean, I don't have a problem with it because it's demonstrably true. I am the guy that made that video. Honestly, I really didn't expect it to become as much of a meme as it has. Honestly, when I made that video, I was like, when I uploaded that video, I was thinking to myself, Shamey, nobody's going to fucking watch this. This is going to be like, 1,000 views tops, but I don't know, that's alright. I did it for myself. It was kind of like just fun to see if I could do something like this. And then it became my most successful video by quite a significant margin, like by like a factor of 10 or something, which is either hilarious in a kind of depressing way or depressing in a kind of hilarious way, depending on your perspective. I think the conclusion we can all reach from this is that clickbait absolutely works, and I think YouTubers will stop using it when it stops working. What's your favourite part when it comes to video making? My favourite consistent part is the scripting and the ideas phase, because that's the point where I'm like, that's the point where I get to sit there up in my own little bubble and just like conceive things and conceptualize things, and like besides moving my digits, sit absolutely still, just like a corpse, like a mummy, just sitting there like moving my fingers. But there's sometimes when I do something bullshit that I'm like, I have no idea if this is going to work, like Spitball 3 or the intro to the Brexit video, where I'm like, don't know if this is going to work. But then there's this kind of transcendent moment where it does, where it all comes together and I'm sitting there like, holy shit, I pulled it off. That's my favourite moment, but that is unfortunately rare and kind of fleeting. Just a Normal Electrode asks, 1. What are your current thoughts on Pokemon as a whole? I think people are right to be disappointed with it recently. But I also think if you're sitting there like chalking it up to laziness or incompetence on the part of the developers, you've not really been paying much attention. Because the thing is that this isn't a sudden, recent problem that Pokemon's having to face. The subpar animations and the limited content in comparison to previous generations. This is something that has been baked into the series since, I want to say maybe Generation 3? Like, Generation 3 was the first real sign that if this series was to continue, it was going to be in trouble. Because it was the first time we had, like, a significant hardware jump, which came with a number of issues that Pokemon found itself kind of unable to overcome. Number one, it had no meaningful way to advertise new content besides making more Pokemon, which is more assets, more design time, more stuff that needs to be programmed without making more. And you can see that in Generation 3 because Ruby, Sapphire, Fire Red and Leaf Green didn't have a lot of features that Crystal had. For example, the animations when the Pokemon burst out of their balls. Even when those were reintroduced in Emerald, they were very limited. They had 2 unique drawings that were then squashed and stretched, compared to Pokemon Crystal's kind of loving hand-drawn animations for with plenty of frames. Well, by Game Boy standards anyway. So this is the problem. The only way that series could find to add meaningful new additions was to add more Pokemon. Um, and as time went on, the systems became more and more powerful. So that was more Pokemon having to be rendered in increasingly more detail. Um, and just now we've reached the point where finally Pokemon has transferred onto its first HD system, and you can really see the cracks beginning to show. Now, most people's counter to that is, of course, well, Pokemon is the most successful franchise of all time. Surely they can afford to throw some more money at it. But that is like a fundamental misunderstanding of how capitalism works. And that's not said as like a radical political stance, but a statement of simple fact. Like, the fact is capitalism is not a meritocracy. You don't make something like of worth and then get paid for it and make a profit and then pour that profit back into making something of worth. That's not really how it works. It is about profit margins. It is about making increasingly more of a profit. So if hypothetically you had like something that could be made super duper cheap, like if you had like, for example, let's say I could make the most successful franchise of all time using this post-it note. Right, on the other side, it's a build order for StarCraft 2. But like this post-it note, I make something with this post-it note, and it becomes the most successful thing in the world. It becomes a phenomenon, a global phenomenon. So when the time comes to iterating upon that, what incentive do I have to then spend a lot of time and money and resources on upgrading that to like run on tablets and stuff if I could conceivably get away with reusing the same post-it note and like just, upgrading it, making some slight improvements, here and there, and then selling that. Do you see what I mean? Like, the incentive to improve is not baked into capitalism, and this is what Pokemon is doing just now, because it is an absolute juggernaut of a franchise. It is the most successful franchise of all time, and it didn't get that way by being cutting edge, like super duper high tech. It got that way by being relatively cheap games that sold absolute gangbusters, like that outsold all these absolutely massive AAA experiences that have had billions and billions and billions of dollars poured into them. That's how it became the most successful franchise, because it makes that much more profit. Now, the other thing that people need to consider is that Pokemon has far more concerns than just releasing the game. Like, people say, oh no, they should just delay it. They just, like give Game Freak a break, delay it for a year, and we'd be happy with that. And I'm sure we would, and I'm sure that would create a lot of goodwill. But the difference between Pokemon and something like Animal Crossing is that Pokemon has an entire media juggernaut behind it. It's this massive, unwieldy thing with like so much momentum that they can't make nimble maneuvers like that. In basic terms, what I mean to say by that is they're not just releasing a game. Each new generation of Pokemon also has lorry loads of merchandise and an anime series and a manga series and movies and all this other stuff behind it that they can't afford to delay. They can't delay all of that stuff to, polish up the game a little bit. Now, that might seem like a really pessimistic assessment, but I think the Pokemon Company maybe saw it coming, because, like, after all, if you've been paying attention to Pokemon for that long, then I'm sure you must have seen this coming at some point. A point where people's expectations of the franchise far overtook what Game Freak could realistically deliver in that time. The reason I say I feel like they've seen it coming is you've seen a major shift in how they've been handling the anime and the movies lately. The thing about the anime, this is the first anime series we've had that doesn't take place entirely within the new generation's region. It's a globe-trotting adventure, and that suggests some foresight, because if that becomes the new standard, then it means that the anime and the games can kind of be decoupled from one another. Additionally, like that, there've been a few remakes and reimaginings, like of like the 3D remake of the Mewtwo movie, and there was like a retelling of like I don't know if it was like the first anime arc or something. I don't really watch the anime or the movies, but there seems to be a shift in strategy there, and I wonder if that's what they're accounting for. I wonder if that's them just kind of separating the games from the rest of the media juggernaut. And if that's the case, that's like a fairly timely decision. They actually reacted to that very, very well. But that may not be the case at all. It might just be a coincidence. So we'll have to wait and see. But fingers crossed. Fingers crossed they know what they're doing. 2. Which video are you most proud of in terms of production? I'm going to go ahead and say the Animal Crossing video because that's the one where I was just like, right, I'm going to work consistently on this. I'm not going to burn myself out. I'm going to be ready at the end of it to move on. And it's going to take as long as it needs to take, just so long as I work on it consistently over a period of time. And I managed to turn that around in like a couple of months. So yeah, definitely the Animal Crossing video because that's how I should be working like all the time. And this is, like I said, this was the time period that I was on antidepressants, so that might have had something to do with it. So I'll need to see about getting a different dosage because they also really spiked my anxiety. Deepweeb asks, now that you have reached 20,000 subs, how long will we have to wait for your own Did You Know Gaming featured episode? The ball's in DYKG's court with that one. 2. How many exhaustive look videos do you think you're going to make? 2. I think it's going to be an exhaustive look at Omega Ruby, and I think it's going to be an exhaustive look at Pokemon Moon, and then I think that's probably going to be it. They take a lot of time to make, and they are not a good critical approach. Not a great critical approach. They take a lot of time to make, and to be honest with you, I can't really see me going much further with them without really, really beginning to repeat myself. I'm already really squeezing this lemon dry with a second one. Like, by which I mean to say that I'm doing my best to avoid just repeating myself verbatim from the first video. And already it's kind of like I'm kind of really filling in the gaps in that video. And I can't imagine like a third layer doing much more. But also just because I can't imagine really making that same format of video about Sword and Shield. I can't imagine making an exhaustive look at Pokemon Shield because the format of that game is so different to kind of this linear adventure. It's a lot more like kind of an MMO light style where you're expected to do raids and everything. So yeah, I'm going to say 2 for just now, but then if you had asked me as soon as I'd launched the Omega Ruby video, I would have said I'm never going to do another one. So, who knows? 3. What have been the biggest misunderstandings in your videos? I would probably say the Ridley video, just as a whole, the Ridley video, for a few reasons. Number one is there's a lot of the time that I feel that people kind of didn't really... I don't want to say, like, take on board what I was saying, because, like, that's, like, it may well be just, like, that's not necessarily that they weren't listening, it just may be that I hadn't changed their minds, But there was stuff that I had already addressed, like saying, like, Ridley appearing in Samus Returns is kind of a bit choppy, is a bit bad, because it doesn't really fill, like, any thematic gaps or anything. And then people would come back and say, well, actually, he's there to bridge the gap between Metroid Prime 3 and Super Metroid. And it's like, yeah, you're talking about the canon there. You're talking about continuity there. Like, that's not... Like, I'm not really interested in kind of like the workings of the mechanic, like the mechanics of the continuity. It's like the effect that each story has. So I feel like there were some kind of like mixed signals there. And that's not me saying that these guys are idiots, that the people that were watching it and raising a protest are idiots. It's just saying that we had different standards, and maybe that's something I ought to take into account next time. The other thing that I think was kind of maybe my bad was, I think I underestimated how attached people could become to the representation of Samus and Ridley and Dark Samus and everything in Smash Brothers, you know? I didn't mean to frame that love as illegitimate, you know? That certainly was not the point, but that seems to be how a few people have read it. Because I've had some comments talking about like me gatekeeping, and that honestly wasn't the point. I wasn't trying to say if you like Smash Brothers, you don't like Samus. You know, you hate Metroid or any of that shite. I mean, Christ, one of the core tenets of my channel, one of the core pillars of my channel is that you don't fucking answer to me. Enjoy things how you like. If you like these characters, I would really recommend going and playing those games because I think you get a much stronger story there. You know, a much stronger story, and honestly, to me, like a much stronger reason to love those characters beyond kind of the comparatively more tepid cliche of Ridley killed Samus's parents. But if that's not you, if I'm saying all this stuff and I'm explaining myself to you and you're still like, no, I kind of like the edgy stuff and I kind of like just kind of like that they keep the continuity meticulous, then fuck man, I can't stop you. Go ahead. Like, it's, you know, I can certainly see how it maybe like came across a bit weird to some people. And that's something that I need to sort out if I'm ever going to do other Metroid videos, because I'm a little too close to this series. But yeah, that's the biggest misunderstanding, I think. Ronan asks, any game that you haven't played yet but you want to? Yeah, tons. Like there is like one of the big problems, one of the big things that gave me a huge crisis of confidence was that I felt like I wasn't playing enough new games. I'm really bad at keeping up with new releases and stuff like that. Because it takes like some emotional energy, and it's if you're constantly worrying about half a dozen other things, including playing games for a reason, for a project like this, it kind of leaves you with less time to experiment and find new games that you like, you know? But to give you a solid answer, I think I would say Shin Megami Tensei. That's one series that I'd really like to get into. Because in the Omega Ruby video, one of the things that I said is, isn't it weird that like Pokemon are just stored in a computer? Isn't it weird that that's the solution they came up with? And the thing is, because I hadn't played Shin Megami Tensei at the time, I didn't realize that it's possible that that was a mechanic lifted directly from Shin Megami Tensei. That like it's Digital Devil Saga, where the devils are stored digitally. You know. The creatures you collect are stored digitally, which is something that's definitely worth noting. Like, I'm not necessarily convinced that it was just an unthoughtful reference, just, hey, we'll lift that. Maybe it was just a way that they thought, hey, this is an easy way to contextualize this. But I think it is important to note, but because I hadn't played that series, I couldn't have known that that was maybe a reference to something else. So, you know, there's that's one series that I'd really like to play. Hexatrix asks, 1. Thoughts on Oxenfree? This is another little bit of a clever question arrangement on my part here. This is me, you know, patting my own back. That's another one of the games that I would really like to play because it looks really interesting, but I just haven't got around to yet. Sorry. Number 2. Is there any video idea or topic or project that you want to take a stab at, but just can't find a way to make it work? Yes, for the longest time, I wanted to make a video on Heroes of the Storm, Blizzard's MOBA, like League of Legends, Dota 2, that sort of thing. It's Blizzard's take on that, because I think it has some really interesting mechanics that prevented me from kind of really gelling with League of Legends or anything. A lot of MOBA fans say that Heroes of the Storm is dumbed down or oversimplified and stuff like that, when I think it actually makes some pretty clever and judicious decisions to keep the flow of a game more about you versus the enemy rather than you versus your teammates. Like, for example, in League of Legends and Dota 2, for those of you that don't know, last hitting an enemy, so getting the final strike on like a little minion, like an NPC minion, will reward you with gold. And that gold is essential to improving your character, because it allows you to go and buy items that will like increase their speed or increase their attack or give them other attributes. The thing is that the way that both of these games metas work is that what you kind of need to do is you need to have one person who is a dedicated like farm, who is dedicated to getting the last hits on these creatures, so that by the end he is an absolute unstoppable powerhouse and can very quickly kill the enemy team. With support from his team, obviously, but he's basically your MVP, your star player, And maybe it's because I came into them too late, or maybe it's because the meta is so defined by the top tier, most efficient play. But either way, I find it difficult to get into because I don't have the opportunity to really feel out these things for myself. As a new player, it's kind of an uphill struggle to learn these things for yourself. Because you basically need to go and look up articles. You need to go and look up who is the best hero to use in a particular position. And the game doesn't tell you this character should be used in position 1 or position 5 or whatever it is. Like, this all sounds like unintelligible jargon to the people who don't know what I'm talking about, and even I barely know what I'm talking about. But like it's like if you are like the AD carry or all this stuff, your teammates, you spend a lot of time kind of struggling with your teammates because your teammates need to know not to kill the mooks, to let you kill the mooks. And so of course, since there's 5 members to a team and only 3 lanes, that means that you've got like 1 character top, 1 character mid, 2 characters bot, one of whom is a support and one of whom is like your main guy, and then another character has to go through the jungle and like just has to know a really, really efficient route through the jungle to clear out all the extra camps because there's not enough gold and experience to go around. And if you know all this, it's a whole new layer of strategy. But if you're a new player, damn, that's pretty steep. That's a pretty steep learning curve. And it means that like a lot of the time you spend time arguing with your team. It breeds toxicity between team members. Because, for example, one of the things that, one of the experiences I had playing League of Legends was at the beginning of the game, like literally 30 seconds into what is usually like a half-hour, 40-minute game, I accidentally killed Red when I shouldn't have. I accidentally killed like a kind of like mini-boss monster that gives you some buffs when I shouldn't have. And the guy that should have killed it immediately went AFK. Like, he just immediately just cursed me out and stopped playing, and we lost. And on the one hand, it's like, oh yeah, you like, that guy's a toxic idiot. On the other hand, I kind of get it, because 30 seconds in, I have apparently completely ruined this guy's plan. I've completely ruined this guy's next half hour of play experience, which is difficult. It's really difficult to parse. And one of the reasons that I got into Heroes of the Storm a lot more easily is that you don't have money. Everybody on your team shares experience, so it's everybody on your team working together to get that experience, and there's no gold. Instead, at particular levels, you get talents. You get just buffs that you don't need to pay for. You're just giving them automatically, and you have a choice of 3 or 4. And so that allows you to build your character a certain way without having to constantly go back to the shops or anything. So it makes games a lot quicker, and it makes games I won't say they're completely devoid of toxicity, because they're not, but it makes games a lot less toxic. I think these things reduce a lot of frustration. And once they've reached that level of skill, I understand high-level players of Dota and LoL being well, this is too oversimplified for me. Totally get that. But it's something that I think is worth considering in the MOBA space, maybe a slightly friendlier introduction. The problem is that all of these comparisons might be bollocks. I might play a few games of Dota 2 tomorrow, and all of a sudden I overcome that learning curve and it clicks with me and I go, oh, of course, this means that it's so much better than HOTS, like, wow, this is great. But the fact is, the unfortunate fact is like I say, it's pretty late in these games' lives at this point. Not to say they're on the decline, but it's they've been out for a while. A lot of people have had the opportunity to figure out how they work. And so, like me as a complete noob is going to come in and have a bit of a miserable experience climbing over that hump. I jokingly said this, but it's kind of true. I just don't have the time or the energy anymore to dedicate to being called homophobic slurs. So yeah, I cannot imagine a way that MOBA video would work. But yeah, I would. God, it's still a huge part of me that would really love to make that. Number 3, prequels video when? Yeah, you've put /sarcasm at the end of that, but Koff asks, why is your Metroid 2 / Samus Returns video no longer public? This is maybe a bit more of a portentous answer than you were expecting when you asked the question, but it's because I prize honesty. It was a video made up almost entirely of criticisms for a game that I neither like nor respect very much, and yet at the end there's this like hand-wringing, almost apologetic tone to the conclusion, because I wanted to be happy that the series was back, even though I clearly wasn't. And like, maybe that's honest in its own way, but it's not really honest in a way that I think is helpful. Additionally, I would really like to go back at some point and cover the Metroid series in depth, like one game at a time, just like focusing entirely on that one game. The Samus Returns video was like this really weird halfway house of being one half praise for Metroid 2 and then the other half criticisms of Samus Returns, and I don't think it really gelled together that well. It's because I didn't quite have the time to go all in on my praise for Metroid 2 or my criticisms of Samus Returns, or indeed my criticisms of Metroid 2 and my praise for Samus Returns. So it kind of resulted in this very lopsided, kind of wonky, slightly disingenuous video that I don't really like. Also, there's this bit where I say, like, like, it's not hashtag the point. And that was I was having a lot of trouble scripting that line, and my good friend Strex just comes out and says, just say hashtag the point. And I put it in for a joke, and it makes me laugh, but I'm also like, oof, that's not going to look good to the general audience or anything. So yeah, I like, long story short, I'd like to go back and redo that video, basically as 2 separate videos at some point. Nano asks, do you have thoughts on Sonic Utopia? Yeah, I do. It's very good. It's a very good game. It's I didn't cover it really because after making the Green Hill Paradise video, I kind of had a little bit of a kind of change of heart / epiphany / whatever you want to call it, about the way that I was approaching that, and about the way that I was approaching the impact that Spitball 3 had on the Sonic community. And I say, like, impact, like, I'm not exactly saying it was meteoric, maybe just, the ping pong ball just pinged the Sonic community. But yeah, I was rethinking that whole context. And the thing was, it was kind of like a mixed feelings about Green Hill Paradise, partly due to kind of like, I want to say, like, jealousy a little bit, because these guys admitted to being slightly inspired by Spitball 3, which is really flattering. But at the same time, that video is clearly not a carbon copy of Spitball 3, They clearly brought a lot of their own expertise and preferences to it, which is really, really good. And yet, I kind of examined it exclusively through the lens of this video that I had made, which is not a great way to go about it, because it kind of diminishes their autonomy and their impact and their hard work. So I decided to maybe like change tack there. Yeah, I've played Sonic Utopia. I love Sonic Utopia. It's incredible. The other reason I didn't want to cover Sonic Utopia is that I've actually spoken to Lang and Murasaki about it, and it's one of those things where it's like, there's the conversation with Lang especially, like, illuminated to me a lot of considerations that have to go into the creation of a game like that I simply could not have foreseen while making like a proof of concept video. Like one of the ones that really sticks in my head is he asked me like, how would you go about establishing out of bounds areas? You know, if you can't use too many bottomless pits, and you can like wall run, how would you go about doing that? And I didn't have a good answer for him because that's not a problem I'd had to contend with making like what is effectively like a very first stage pitch. So basically, this is me saying that if anybody who's actually made a Sonic fan game inherently has a lot more expertise in the subject than I do, and I think it's, you know, they know what they're doing, you know, because a lot of them will be coming from kind of the same perspective as I am, but they will actually have had to wrestle with a lot of the realities of development. So I didn't really want to cover like Sonic Utopia or anything too much more, but like, yeah, absolutely, it is incredible. Like the Sonic fan community is absolutely insane. Like it's fortuitous that this was asked by Nano, who is an artist who does Sonic stuff and really, really good. But yeah, the Sonic fan base is absolutely insane, and like all of these fan games, like Sonic Utopia, Green Hill Paradise, Sonic GT, like Sonic Studio, all of them just wow. Like they like Sonic Robo Blast 2. I'm going to be sitting here reeling off like Sonic fan game names for a while. Listen, they're all incredible. Like that fan base is so talented and so dedicated. They get such a bad rap, you know? It's so unfair. They get such a bad rap because it's like, yes, okay, there's a lot of porn. There's a lot of porn of everything, but like these like talented guys just get like swept under that rug as well. Unbelievable. Also, do you have any wishes or worries for Metroid Prime 4? Love your work, keep it up. Thanks very much. I have some. I don't really have many worries at the minute. They announced Metroid Prime 4, and I went mental. I went ballistic. I was sitting there like, yes, Metroid Prime 4. I was sitting there fucking crying, dancing in the club, like, yeah, I miss your mom, son. And nobody's going to get that. But yeah, I was really, really excited. And then there was radio silence, and I was like, all right, okay. And then they announced, we're canning everything we've done so far. It's going to Retro Studios. And I was like, all right, okay. And then they announced, well, actually, Retro Studios came to us with a pitch. And so we kind of like handed it over. And that's the point where I was like, okay, phew. I have a lot of faith in Retro Studios. I don't think they've ever made a game that has been anything less than great. And I know it's not the same team, but still, I still think that company deserves a lot of respect for it. And you know, it's until we see some footage, I can't really say too much more. But yeah, I'm at the minute, I'm kind of, I believe, cautiously optimistic is probably the best way to describe it. I'm not like super hype. I'm not like completely unconcerned, but I'm like, yeah, I think I am as happy as I could possibly be with the state that it's in just now. Which is to say, it's a developer that I trust and I know will do a great job with it. It's in their hands, and if that is disproven, that's not really something I could see coming at this stage, you know? My wishes for it are threefold. Number one, tone down Zero Suit Samus. Not a big fan of Zero Suit Samus. I've been over this so many times. You don't need to hear it again. Number two, maybe make the combat a bit punchier. Like, if you play like Metroid Prime and a lot of other like first-person shooters, I know it's not a first-person shooter technically, whatever you want to call it. But if you play Metroid Prime back to back with first-person shooters, like the guns and stuff have a lot more impact in that, and I think that would be a nice thing to bring to Metroid Prime, because a lot of its combat encounters, because they rely on a lock-on and strafe system, kind of play out similarly. You know, they kind of play out more like puzzles, and I think it would be nice to just have some more impactful fights. And number three, I think it would be really, really cool if they could bring back some of Super Metroid and Zero Mission's non-linearity through skill mastery. I'm not entirely convinced that that's going to be what they're going to do, because I'm fairly sure Kensuke Tanabe doesn't like that kind of gameplay system. But I think that's exactly what elevates like a good Metroid game or a great Metroid game into a legendary one. Just like being able to do advanced techniques to reach different parts of the map before you're quote unquote supposed to be able to. Those are my 3 wishes. Daniel Rodriguez asks, what is your most unpopular opinion concerning Sonic? Something everyone else seems to agree on except for you. I don't really know, because the Sonic fan base has never really struck me as particularly monolithic. You know, it's very fragmented. There's a lot of different people that think a lot of different things, but I don't know. I've actually, just in the process of saying that sentence, realized what my hot take is, and I'm not going to say it because I'm going to get crucified. So I'm going to wimp out. I'm going to say the cowards one instead. Personally, I think that STC Sonic is the best version of the character, and that's what I consider to be a mild take compared to the other one that I thought of. Yeah, which I'm not saying without having some major substantiation. Danik Velocity asks, do you plan on covering Archie Sonic and Sonic the Comic? I feel like there are too many game retrospectives. Well, firstly, sorry, there's going to be more game retrospectives coming from this very channel, buddy. No, but I do plan on covering Archie Sonic and Sonic the Comic. Yeah, Sonic the Comic's very near and dear to me, and I think it is this absolutely fantastic, like, lovely comic that is often misrepresented online. I would need to cover Sonic the Comic anyway as part of the big Sonic the Hedgehog marathon that I'm doing as a result of having reached the $250 goal on Patreon. But if I'm being entirely honest with you, it's been a shiter of a year. My 3DS is fucked. And, God, I don't want to just make this channel like Metroid, Sonic, Pokemon on a loop. But man, I really want to just do Sonic the Comic sooner rather than later. It's just a case of deciding like what scope that should take, because there's a huge part of me that's sitting here like, it's a comic. Comics are like a non-audio medium, so I can just get away with just covering it like that. But on the other hand, did you see B-Mask's Fantastic Four video? Like that, like, oh man, if you could get like some professional voices in there and just like really sell people on why this comic is so good, I would love to make that video. Fuck, I've just talked myself into making that video. That's going to be a lot of fucking work. Thanks for that, Danik. You've undone me. You've unzipped me. Tool Assisted Soul asks, 1. What are your thoughts on the drop dash from Sonic Mania? It's really, really good. It's really clever. I believe it came from the Sonic 3 prototype. I could be wrong about that. But yeah, really, really clever, because it is a great way to distinguish Sonic as a more speedy, more flow-based character than Tails or Knuckles, without doing something so cliche and potentially problematic as just increasing his top speed or whatever. 2. What are your thoughts on some SDC exclusive characters like Captain Plunder, Supersonic, Techno and Shortfuse? I fucking love Captain Plunder. Like, Captain Plunder is not just my favourite, like one of my favourite Sonic characters, he's one of my favourite characters, period. He is the piratiest pirate to ever have existed. He is so like British comics in the 90s, like the most exaggerated possible version of a pirate. Like this big, mean, burly, lumpy guy with like big tusks, an eye patch, a hook for a hand, and instead of a peg leg, he's got like a caster wheel. Just this incredible piece of character design. And like, I've seen people try and make him look more like a Sonic character, which I totally understand, totally noble endeavour, but it just completely removes everything that I think is so appealing about that character, because he's so ugly, he's so grotesque, and he's so much fun. There are so many amazing jokes like about Captain Plunder. that I'm not going to repeat here. Just, just yeah, fantastic character. Just absolutely love Captain Plunder. And I'm so glad you asked me about him. Seriously. Supersonic. For those of you that don't know, Supersonic in Sonic the Comic wasn't like just a superpowered form of Sonic. It was kind of more of a Jekyll and Hyde, or Bruce Banner and the Incredible Hulk dynamic, where Sonic would lose control and become violent and kind of a more of a menace to friend and foe alike. And it's such a jarring and strange change if you didn't grow up with that. But I think it's really, really clever for a few reasons. Number one is that it really takes into account like the story that STC had been telling up until that point, that was heavily based on like the Sonic Bible that was written in America. But also Nigel Kitching played the games and found that he had a lot of trouble controlling Supersonic. And so that's how he felt to him. Like, it felt like manic and out of control. And I think that interpretation is a lot more valuable. And I think it's honestly a bit more interesting than Supersonic just being like an invincible Sonic. Which isn't to say that he's absolutely beyond reproach. There are still a few times that he's used as a bit of a kind of Deus Ex Machina, get out of jail free card for a tricky situation. But yeah, I think he's really good, and I think he only gets more interesting and does more interesting things to Sonic as the series goes on. Techno and Short Fuse, they're great. I really like them. I love Short Fuse's design. I maybe wish they had been used a little bit more in the original run, but yeah, no, I really like them. 3. If there's anything you don't like about STC, be it a storyline or anything really, what is it and how would you change it if you could? I'm not really sure I would change anything about it. I'm not doing like a meme at this, but I'm not doing like the whole enlightened stance meme again. But yeah, I'm not really sure that I would change anything about it. Like, a lot of that comic, it's like, it's good stuff, it's bad stuff, it's weird stuff, it's clever stuff. It's so ingrained in me. And a lot of the stuff that I reckon would not make sense to like a Sonic fan or an American audience makes a lot of sense to me as somebody that grew up with British comics. Like, in terms of a British, like a UK comics climate, Sonic the Comic fits perfectly. It fits so smoothly in there. So I don't think there was much that I would change. It's also a bit of a weird question because for the last 10 years I have been a staff member on Sonic the Comic Online. So if there's anything that I really don't like, I can change it. Which is a weird position to be in. The man of many skills has asked, I've recently gotten a bit into Sonic, don't apologise, and I have some questions on your opinions of some things. 1. I have read a bit of STC Online and I know that you write some stories in it. What was your first strip about? I'd probably better explain this. STC Online is the British UK Sonic comic was called Sonic the Comic, or STC. And what happened was it came out and it was running really strong. People loved it. But then after about 5 years, a publishing mandate basically assumed that the readership would cycle once every 5 years. So after 5 years, no original readers would still be left. So what they started to do in order to cut costs and save money was they began to replace because each issue of Sonic the Comic was made up of 4 strips, and they began to replace one strip each issue with a rerun, with a repeat of an old strip. And what happened was they slowly did that more and more while the price of the comic was going up. And eventually it became completely reruns. At which point a lot of the original readership completely jumped ship because they were like, why would we pay for a comic that we've already read and is all out of order and everything and is more expensive? But basically it was a bit of an not an editorial, it was a bit of a publishing flub. Because the problem was that Sonic the Comic was of such a quality that it defied the trend in licensed tie-in material. All the other stuff that was coming out, that the fad would wane and then the fan base would move on. And so, of course, like if it lasted 5 years at all, that's when they would begin cycling the content. But with Sonic the Comic, it had maintained such a high quality for such a long time that even while Sonic was basically dead in terms of video games, like he still had like a presence in the UK because of this comic. You know, it was really, really good. It was so good, in fact, that when it became all reruns, the fans said, "No having that, mate." And they basically revived it online. And since then, it has had the endorsement and sometimes, when we're really lucky, the involvement of members of the original staff. We've even had some of the American staff like Tracy Yardley on, and it's even been acknowledged by Sega. It's insane. It's such a labour of love. So that's what STC Online is, and I've been writing for that for the last 10 years or so. So there you go. That's you caught up. My first strip was Knuckles, Skeletons in the Closet, which was, man, that was a story. That was a weird time. Okay, so settling, it's story time. This video's going fucking all night, baby. So what happened was this was back in 2010. I just finished school, and because of anxiety and depression, God, what a fun video this is turning out to be. Because of anxiety and depression, I wasn't going to uni that year, and it's all good. It turns out taking that gap year was absolutely the best thing I could have done. But in the meantime, during all of this, I just threw in a suggestion to the editor of Sonic the Comic Online at the time, Charles Ellis, asking him, "Hey, what about a story where Knuckles finds a skeleton of one of the Lost Echidna people?" This was at the point, this was 2010, so this was during the first and best series of Stephen Moffat's Doctor Who. And so I was well into that, and I was like, plot twists, baby. Plot twists are the way to go. It doesn't matter about the themes or the characterization or something, so long as you can twist and turn everything, so long as you can play with continuity and twist and turn stuff, then that's the way to go. That's how you write a good story. So yeah, at the time, I started writing this, and it was only supposed to be one part, and then it kind of got spiraled out of control and became 3 parts, and it twists and turns around 3 different times. And somehow it's come together into a strip that isn't quite unreadable, but it does rely quite heavily on some of the technicalities of continuity. So it's certainly not a strip that I would make nowadays, but funnily enough, it also managed to kind of inform a lot of the thematic conceits that I'm really wanting to explore now with it. So, got away with that one. But yeah, that was my first story. It was Knuckles, Skeletons in the Closet. I don't think that was the first one that was actually published, though. I think that was Sonic Sky Chase, which was just more knockabout fun, fewer plot twists, a little bit less thingy. I think that story kind of is a bit more simple, a bit more fun, until the editor realised, a year after it had been published, here, this is just like a complete repeat of the story from issue 6. Which was a bit embarrassing. Yeah, so that's the answer to that question. There's no conclusion here.
Shay May asks, what the fuck, what happened to the audio? Yeah, I have no idea. I know for a fact I recorded it with Adobe Audition because I have footage of myself turning to the screen and going, yeah, that's still recording. But it's not there. That audio simply does not exist, and I have no idea where it went. So, sorry about that. Next few questions will have some pretty subpar audio, but after that, we go back to normal towards the end.
Number 2, what's your favourite STC Online story? Probably The Syndicate. I really like The Syndicate. I also really like Vaikama is Coming Home. The art in that is mwah. But yeah, it's those 2 stories I think are really good. I think they kind of I think they were basically the proof. I think The Syndicate was the proof of concept that was needed to show that this thing could be continued without Nigel Kitching and Lou Stringer, the 2 writers that had written the original run. 3, if you could change anything from the original STC continuity, what would it be? Like I said before, probably nothing, but Also, like I said before, if I want to change anything, I can, and I have. I'm the king of Sonic the Hedgehog now, motherfuckers. Rouge the Bat will now appear exclusively in lingerie. I should cut that. That's not good. Not a good joke. 4. How do you plan things at STCO? Is there a roadmap or something? There's no roadmap, but there is a meticulously organised Excel document by our very own LT Dangerous, so we know where we're going. How we plan things is, the thing is that the core staff of STCO, we've been mates for like a decade now. So we all know each other pretty well, and we're all pretty good at like communicating and like tossing ideas around, and also saying no to one another when the time comes. Our problem is we're not doing such a great job communicating with either the broader team or the fans. I think we could definitely do better at that. Again, don't mean to blame everything on it, but it's been a bit of a shiter of a year, especially for some of the members of our staff. So that is something to improve on, but that's something we are planning to improve. We have discussed that. The Lemonade Stand Man asks, congrats on reaching 20k subscribers, Shay. I've loved hearing your thoughts and analysis on games over the years, so happy your channel continues to grow. I guess my question is, what's a favourite game of yours that you'd consider an unpopular or underrated gem by the general gaming population? The Wonderful 101. Just the Wonderful 101. And I don't blame the general gaming population, because my experience with this game was kind of weird myself. I remember I was one of the suckers that bought a Wii U and Sonic Lost Worlds to go along with it. So that's how much of a fucking sucker I am. But yeah, I was one of the... I bought a Wii U, and when I was looking at the Nintendo highlight reels and the upcoming games and all this stuff, they showed off a little bit of, it was called, Platinum Project 101 or Platinum Project something. I can't remember. It had a code name at the time, and it just kind of looked like this weird Pikmin game, and I was like, not really that interested in this. Anyway, it wasn't until much, much later, it wasn't until 2016, 2017 or so, that I learned it was directed by Hideki Kamiya. And I don't know how I missed this. I don't know how, I don't know how I managed to miss this. I don't know why that wasn't the first thing that was put at the top of every single trailer for the game, but yeah, I managed to miss that. And I was like, fucking hell, that's a Hideki Kamiya game. Going to buy that day one, immediately looking for a purchase. Managed to find a second-hand copy down at the local CEX. And I got home and I popped it in, and I got the controller and I was ready for a night of hardcore gaming. And I hated it. It's not a confusing game. Everything that it does is completely consistent within its own rules. But it's a bit of an overwhelming game at the beginning, is I think the way I would describe it. The easiest way to describe what the Wonderful 101 is to say it's an action game like Bayonetta and Devil May Cry, except it's absolutely not. Because in those games, you are playing as one hero against hundreds of monsters. In the Wonderful 101, you're playing as 100 heroes against one or two monsters, usually. And the thing is the way these heroes work is that they can combine, physically morph together to create these hard-like constructs, kind of like the Green Lantern's ring, to create these giant weapons like a hand or a sword or a gun or stuff like that. And one of the things that took me the longest time to understand is it's only the character that you're controlling at the moment that can actually take damage. The other 99 heroes become a resource. For example, the defensive move is called Unite Guts, and you transform into this big pudding. And so if you're hit by a blunt attack, the pudding will repel that. But I remember this one early boss who holds up his hand like this and then slams it down. And so, of course, okay, that's a blunt attack. I've got Unite Guts. I'll stand underneath it. It timed the move correctly. It crashed down the pudding and then crashed straight through it. And I was like, well, what the fuck? That's so inconsistent. So I just apparently can't block that. No. You can block that. You just need to have a big enough pudding. The problem was I didn't have enough teammates with me to be able to block that. But yeah, so the number of units you have in your team is another resource that you have to keep an eye on. And once you click with all these little rules and little technicalities that are perfectly consistent once you know them, what you are met with is what I consider to be the greatest action game of all time. Because the thing is that you've got stuff like Devil May Cry and Bayonetta, right? And those are games where you are in control of the battlefield. You are like knocking enemies around, putting enemies up in the air to keep them out of trouble, so that you're weaving in and out of these enemies who are all trying to attack you. And high level play is about realizing like how to navigate these kind of like some of the more problematic attacks, but also it is about like coming up with your own combos that, like, to a low-level player like myself, like, are fundamentally kind of identical. You know, they have the same result. But to a high-level player, of course, there's little intricacies. Maybe one does slightly more damage. Maybe one kind of knocks them away slightly differently. And, like, anticipating that knockback, then shooting them to interrupt it, then using the move that allows them to teleport or dash up to it and everything. All of that is part of high-level play. But with the wonderful 101, the combos are super simple. The combo is basically just hammer the attack button, or maybe wiggle the stick back and forth, or around once, or, you know, double tap it, or you know, use different ways of wiggling the stick in conjunction with tapping the single attack button. But what that means is that there is an immediacy and a simplicity to all of the controls that means the focus is entirely on your decision making during combat. And it really is like you're fighting these massive alien monsters that you need 100 superheroes to take down. And so it's a lot more focused on defensive play and your decision making in the heat of the moment. And what that results in to me is such a satisfying loop, because it's like you weaving in and out of the enemy, you like really having to take into account everything that the enemy is doing and then figure out the best way to counterattack. Like, it requires like a fairly level head. Like, if you just like take your time and really pay attention to everything in the game, which you're not going to manage to do first time. You're just not. There's too much going on. But if you really take your time and pay attention to everything that's going on and think about what the game has taught you can be done in one area of the game and try applying that to another area of the game, you really will have such a great time with it. So long as you don't mind like getting a bad score on your first run through. Like, there are so many like gameplay shifts that put a lot of people off, but honestly, again, practice them a few times, think about them like in context of how the main mechanics work, and you will love them. You will be so surprised by how many of them are actually so much fun to play. It's seriously, like, it's fantastic. It's so satisfying once it gets going. And like, I remember recently there was like a moment where I've played this game for what must be well over 100 hours at this point. And shit, man, like, there was this hidden level that I was having a lot of difficulty with because it was like I couldn't get the correct combo score. It was like a level where you can only use like 10 Unite Morphs, and so you're supposed to use like alien weapons against them because you can pick up alien weapons. Alright, okay, cool. But using the alien weapons and destroying all the enemies doesn't get you enough combos. So I was like, well, you know, after 100 hours of play, what the fuck? What do I do here? What you're supposed to do, and I didn't realize you could do this, is you're supposed to pick up the alien weapon, use it, but what you can do while using it is immediately switch to a Unite Morph without dropping the alien weapon. So you can combine alien weapons and Unite Morph combos with the alien weapon getting you loads of points and the Unite Morph getting you loads of multiplier, and you can just skyrocket your score. So 100 hours in, it gave me this hidden level and this little hidden challenge that also demonstrated to me how much more sophisticated and robust the enemy weapon system is in comparison to Bayonetta. Genius. Mind-blowing. Like, honestly, just one of the best games ever, and people don't play it. Play the wonderful 101. James asks, I've been seeing a lot of great video essays recently, including yours, and it's been leaving me inspired to make my own. But I've never wrote a video essay or even really made a YouTube video before. What advice would you have for a complete newbie who's looking to get started? Just do it. Like, haha, Shia LaBeouf meme, but seriously, just do it. Like, you don't think you have the writing talent, doesn't matter, just do it. You don't think you have the equipment or like high quality audio, like a great microphone, doesn't matter, just do it. Like, just find a way to do it and then do it. And that sounds like I'm taking the piss. That sounds like I'm being like dismissive, but no, I'm serious. Stop thinking about it. Like right now, just stop this video. If it's not like midnight or something, but if you're in the position to stop this video right now and spend a couple of hours just starting on it. Like the only way you're going to figure out a workflow is by doing it and then figuring that out. You can't figure this kind of stuff out by thinking about it, you know? It really is, you just have to sit down and get a Word document on the go and just start typing. Start noting down your thoughts, maybe put them in an order that makes sense to you. I can't really give you a formula. You just have to figure out for yourself how it works. One thing that I will say, one like little piece of advice that I think is quite useful is don't try and structure your writing around good segues. Make your broad points, like make a bullet point list of your points and then put them in the order that makes the most sense and then think of a segue between them. I used to really like focus too hard on the segues and it would end up with arguments that kind of looped back around on themselves or was untidy or I'd have to end up repeating myself. So that's my big piece of advice, but seriously, just get started. Matchroom asks, 1. What's your process for making videos? I.e., how do you pick a topic? How do you go about writing the script? When do you know a video is complete, etc.? The thing is it's usually one big idea that I want to express that I start with, even if it's like just this moment in a game that I'm playing. I don't know, it's difficult to kind of impart because it's just how I'm hardwired to be. It's just how I've been ever since I was little. It's just if I see something that I like or there's a bit in a game that I think is really interesting or I see something that really bugs me, is what I end up doing is I end up sitting there like while nobody's around. I don't like people being around when I'm playing games and stuff, because what I will start doing is I will start talking out loud to myself like, no, that's genius because it's doing this about this and then it's leading into this. Oh man, that's so cool. And people look at me like I'm a madman. But yeah, that's just kind of how I've been hardwired to be. But usually it's like there'll be a spark or like a moment or one big idea that just like kicks the whole thing off. And I'm like, oh man, I need to make a video basically to justify sticking that in a video, you know? How do I know when it's complete? Well, this is something I have more trouble with because when I'm doing like a critique, when I'm doing something that doesn't just have an argument, like a structured argument to it, like the frog video, I find it difficult to know where to stop. Because I'm like, well, I'm never really going to get the opportunity to return to this and to talk about this aspect of the gameplay again. So I might as well do it while I'm here. And that ends up with like what was supposed to be a half-hour Animal Crossing video taking 2 hours. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's maybe something I need to kind of curb just for efficiency's sake. Like, I think there's a few things in that Animal Crossing video I could have just, like, a few days I could have just sliced out and just, like, saved myself the hassle, you know? There's no real hard rule to it. It's just I kind of know. 2. Who would win? 2. Who would win? One of each Pokemon or 1 billion lions? Me. Susie Minike asks, 1. What creators would you say you've learned from or drawn from in terms of critical perspective, editing, or any other part of the process? There are a few. Number 1, Matthew Matosis. Like, I think in terms of like the raw molten core of game analysis, like the interactive part, the technical part, the mechanical part of game analysis, I don't think there's anybody in this sphere who comes close to Matthew Matosis' insight. He really, like, especially with his more recent videos, like he has been knocking it out of the park lately. There is so much complexity expressed in such a short period of time, like that really gets to the bare nub of the act of playing games. Like, one of the big things that he said recently that I thought was so interesting was that, like, Breath of the Wild isn't an amazing game because you can climb any surface. It's an amazing game in spite of that. And then he went on to explain himself about that, and I was like, Christ almighty, like, I'm not sure I agree, but wow, that is such a useful way of looking at it. It teaches you such a useful way of thinking about games. So he was the first big one. The second one is H Bomber Guy. I remember a few years ago, I was surfing around on YouTube, as you do, and I found this video called Fallout 3 is Garbage and Here's Why. And I distinctly remember going, oh, for God's sake. Like, that sounds so reactionary. That's going to be such like a self-indulgent rant. And I clicked on it, and like within a few minutes, I was like, oh fuck, this is actually incredible. This is actually really, really, really good. And then I devoured that, and then I watched the rest of his stuff. And then I had a fucking massive crisis of confidence. I was like, well, fuck, like, this guy is so good, because it's almost like he is the complete polar opposite of Matthew Matosis. Like, not in terms of the quality of criticisms, but just in terms of the direction he approaches it from. Because rather than be like sedate and authoritative, H-Bomb revels in his own subjectivity. When No Man's Sky came out, it was pretty much universally thought to be a complete shit show, like a complete disaster. And yet here comes H-Bomb with this like video that's presented in a kind of interesting way. The Angry Game Smasher has like a critique to make about the way that we present ourselves online, but rather than argue the point, like this massively inherently subjective thing from a point of like anger and detraction, trying to take it down, he's arguing that point like of actually, here's how the experience that this game gives you is maybe unique, is maybe worth prizing. And at least to a lot of the time, I'm sitting there like, my God, I could, like, you're talking bollocks, mate. I could not disagree more, but I am so fucking happy you're saying it, because it's so valuable to get that perspective, to get those ideas and those opinions about how art and games and stuff can affect people in different ways. And like, after I got over that big crisis of confidence, I was like, no, you know what? That's such a wonderful way to approach things, because being that subjective, being so comfortable in your experience, being so exclusive to you, leads to so much more honest criticism. It's wonderful, and I really like approaching things from that direction now. The third one is BMask. Similar situation. I found BMask's videos, devoured them, and then was like, well, fuck. How am I going to compete with this? Like, again, massive crisis of confidence there. Because the thing is that BMask is so concise and precise and articulate. Like, he understands like character design and drama and storytelling like so well, and he has the fucking technical chops to back it up. Like, he knows about a lot of the history and stuff that has gone into these, that goes into the theatricality of how we experience stories. The big one for me with BMask was that Mask of the Phantasm video, which like single-handedly vindicates and justifies Batman because of that analysis of that scene where he's sitting there in front of his parents' grave, pleading with them to like allow him to stop being Batman, and he doesn't get a response. Because BMask is absolutely right. Like, that's exactly what Batman is it's not a rash, because there's so much of Batman has been about trying to justify, trying to make it more realistic, trying to say, oh, why would a person behave like this? But the whole point of Batman is it's such a theatrical concept. It's such a dramatic concept. It is a guy who is so saddened by the death of his parents that he decides no more crime. I'm going to single-handedly put a stop to that happening ever again, which is so dramatic a response and so arrogant and says so much about that character. And it's so much more interesting that way than trying to kind of like bury it with kind of a realistic interpretation, you know? BMask taught me like this whole new way to look at stories as like a dramatic construct rather than think too much about like the continuity or like, you know, of the technicalities of its construction, which is historically where I really like to sit, like about the technicalities of its construction. He instead like taught me, hey, it's, you know, these things are stories, they are dramatic, they are personal to people, and that's valuable. So yeah, BMask is another one. I'm also a really big fan of the Geek Critique. I love his kind of like personal, I was there at the time stories. I love Digi Valentine. I love his like his stories always make you laugh. You know, like I've cried laughing at so many of his stories. They're incredible. Number 3, big one. I really like the Gaming Brit. I really like Charlie Cade. Because there is a dedication to authenticity with Charlie that is absolute, like, it's borderline psychotic. Like, both in terms of his own opinions, he will never, ever, ever compromise his own thoughts on a game to please somebody, but also in terms of actually presenting you with the game as it was when it first came out. Because so often people will play like the HD collections and everything, especially if you live in Europe, because not only are those the games that work best with our televisions, but because in PAL territories, PAL televisions only worked at 50 hertz. So they only had a frame rate that was around 17% slower than the NTSC standard that's used in America and Japan. And so what happened was in PAL territories in the olden days, a lot of the time, games were slowed down by that 17%. Like literally they ran slower, not just the frame rate. So in the UK, most games before like 2002 ran 17% slower. They ran at kind of like an inauthentic pace. Charlie has gone to the trouble of like importing American PlayStation 2s and getting them to work and hooking them up and setting them up, putting them through like recording stuff that, you know, like I've got an Elgato here that does not like anything before the GameCube. So he's got the recording equipment for that and an upscaler. So you are getting the most authentic possible gameplay footage that looks good for modern day screens. It's really impressive how much he puts into that, and he deserves to be commended for it, like a lot more than he gets, I think. 2, how has your sweet child Lava Reef Zone been doing? Everybody asks about Lava Reef Zone, but nobody asks about Constantine.
Blank227 asks, hey Shay, I know it's been rough with gameplay capturing for your next project lately, so just wanted to say that I hope you're doing well and not letting that get to you too hard. Thanks man, I really appreciate it. Anyway, my question. Have you ever desired to work in game development, either as a designer or an artist? And if so, what sort of games would you be interested in working on? Yes, is the answer to that. I would love to work on a game at some point. It was actually like my first choice for university before English was actually like game design at Abertay, but I wasn't allowed. But yeah, no, I would really love to work on a game at some point. And I've been kind of toying with the idea of maybe getting started and just like, you know, like I was saying earlier, the best way to get started with something is to just do it, is to just dive in. So I was thinking of maybe getting started with that at some point, like next year or something. But the problem is just kind of like juggling time and everything. Because I think if I were going to put that much time investment into something, it would kind of preclude me doing YouTube videos. You know, and like I say, it's not really my intention to give up on YouTube videos just quite yet. It's the way that my brain works is I'm not really willing to give up on anything that I've started without giving it a good full stop, underline it. So if ever that happens, you'll definitely have fair warning, and there'll probably be like a good few videos still left to make. I would definitely, there's definitely some videos that I know are going to be done before I'm done with this. But yeah, absolutely. I was really thinking of just jumping in with both feet into that. I was also thinking of putting together a portfolio with some of my writing and art, because I would need to kind of demonstrate to people that I can do like concept art and such. I'm fairly sure I can, but I think there's some stuff, you know, like I need to be able to prove that I can. That's the main thing. So
once I get a portfolio together, which is kind of like an imminent job once I'm done with this current Sonic the Comic Online strip I need to finish. Once I get those put together, I would like to maybe put a call out on Twitter and say if there's anybody making a game that needs a writer or a concept artist or both that knows something about narrative design, give us a shout. I would love to work with you. So yeah, as for what kind of games, basically any. But of course, the thing is, I think I would be kind of precluded at the beginning if I were to work on it. If I were to work on it by myself, I think I would be kind of precluded at the beginning by my own skill set. But in the long run, I would love to work on anything. You know, like I've got a few ideas knocking around in my head. Like I say, it is subject to time and my own technical proficiency. Like I may find after trying it out that I don't actually like programming at all. But yeah, I've got some ideas knocking around in my head for like a couple of RPGs and stuff. And what I'm especially proud of is that only one of them is a rip-off of Sonic Spitball. But I think in that case, that would be a massive programming undertaking that I like literally would not have the skill for. I think a complete noob saying, yeah, I could do a 3D Sonic game is, maybe a little insulting to programmers. Salem Alarak, sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly, by the way, mate. What is the thing that most frequently captures your imagination, and how do you use it in your creative endeavours? The main thing, I think, is a sense of reality. It's more and more nowadays, you see, like, games and shows and comics and stuff kind of referencing their own mythology or their own continuity or like significant tropes in their genre more than they actually reference the reality, like the real life experiences that they are trying to dramatize. I think a sense of reality can really lend so much to whatever it is that's being created. Like, for example, an easy example would be Star Wars, of course, like the original trilogy, the lightsaber battles were drawing from an old dramatic kind of standard of just sword battles, the swashbuckling movies and stuff. And those were to create a sense of thrill and excitement and tension and also display a conflict between two characters visually. And then you come to the prequels, and the extravagant acrobatics are really well choreographed and extremely impressive, but they don't quite give you the same sense of like opposing ideology or anything as you would get with a much slower, much more realistic sword fight, Like the lightsabers, before they became institutionalized as lightsabers, were just basically a science fiction sword. A fucking cool science fiction sword, but before the Jedi were canonized as their own thing, it was just kind of like this warrior caste, this pious, very, very, very skilled warrior class. And I think that's where it kind of begins to go wrong. Just we're all becoming more and more literate in terms of fiction and how fiction works. And so that allows writers to kind of take shortcuts that I'm not always necessarily sure are in the best interests of the story that they're trying to tell. It kind of feels like a lot of stories nowadays are just kind of trying their best to get to the point as quickly as possible. When honestly, there's a lot to be said for kind of just slowing down and making your reader spend some time in that world if it forges a deeper connection with characters and stuff like that. James Chapman asks, what would you change in the games industry today? Honestly, I think I've really had enough at this point of kind of the rat race of physics and graphics getting more and more impressive with each new console generation and having to one-up themselves and all that stuff. The thing is that it's kind of a Flight of Icarus affair where the closer these things get to like photorealism, the more jarring it is when something weird or wacky happens. Like Jedi Fallen Order. The reason I'm referencing so much Star Wars is because I've been on a real Star Wars bender lately. But Jedi Fallen Order is an example I can think of. It's like you're playing the main character and you're moving them around, and like when they start moving, when you hit the sprint button, they have to kind of like get down and do this really awkward and turgid kind of like building up to speed animation. And it just always feels kind of like, oh, when you use it, it doesn't feel maybe quite that satisfying to use it, but it's done like that because it's like, physically it's more realistic. And the character has like algorithms and stuff for each one of his limbs, so they'll flail in different ways when he's falling and stuff like that. But what it means is when you're like walking and you catch like a wall with that arm and it kind of breaks and contorts and waggles all over the place, it just becomes more and more jarring and it takes me out of it. When honestly, like back in the day, it may not have looked as impressive to a spectator, but when you had stuff like Jedi Outcast and the character would just like move like a Roomba, just no acceleration, they would just like kind of like move very kind of on a binary scale, it felt a lot more satisfying to actually play. So I think chasing that white whale of realism is really something I'd like to see gone. I think graphics kind of plateaued a wee while ago. And yet you're still having people like just struggling to make more and more and more impressive games that are impressing less and less and less at a time, and are often leading to people working in miserable conditions with a game that they spend years working on, that comes out with less content or fewer features and stuff like that. And at some point, I'm like, yeah, I am more than happy to trade off the graphical fidelity for everything that comes with it, Or rather, everything that it comes without. You get free reign to resurrect a franchise or game that's not had a new entry in over a decade. What franchise, why, and what would be your vision over it? It's a bit of a cheat, because technically it had an expansion pack released in 2015, but I'd probably say StarCraft? Because the thing is, StarCraft 2 had so many amazing big ideas, but it was so busy falling over itself to get to its next big idea that it didn't really have the time to flesh a lot of them out. And honestly, I think a StarCraft sequel that kind of took its time a little bit more could really do some really interesting stuff with a lot of those like concepts introduced. Like the Zerg, for example. There's a lot of talk about their philosophy. Like Abathur is particularly interesting because he talks a lot about evolution and how he is always striving for perfection, but that he knows there's an inherent trade-off there and that he will never be able to reach it. Stuff like that is quite interesting. There's also some like kind of extracurricular stories that have been told. Like, for example, there's skins for the Protoss in the multiplayer called the Golden Age. And what they tell is they tell a story where, because the whole story of the Protoss in that game is about a bunch of disparate communities, all of them Protoss, but a bunch of different like religions and sects and cults in different part of Protoss society coming together as one. But then you have this skin called the Golden Age, which basically fetishizes like the traditional view of the Protoss, like the golden age of the Protoss, like as the Kali, like a particular part of the Protoss, has been fetishized by that skin. And that's super, super interesting because there's lots of little descriptions about how sometimes the other groups find that pretty fucking offensive considering what they did in the past. Shit, man, that's really interesting. It's never going to be expanded upon. Moth asks, 1. What are your opinions on moths and why are they superior to butterflies? Call it a hunch, but just with the wording of that question, Moth, I think you might have a wee bit of an agenda going on. I think you're kind of railroading me here a wee bit. 2. Favourite book of all time? Poison by Chris Wooding. It's been my favourite since I was a kid. I love it. It's just a really great adventure, really, really fun and interesting characters, and it gets kind of meta without going completely up its own arse. Poison, Chris Wooding. I highly recommend a lot of Chris Wooding's work, actually. It's really good. 3. Obligatory when is next video coming out question. Hopefully sooner than you might expect. I'm not waiting around for this 3DS situation to get fixed. I'd like to maybe do a couple of shorter videos. Shorter videos. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, it's hopefully not as long as you might think. DCAS asks, what kind of books do you read? Do you articulate yourself so well because of reading? Historically, it's kind of been fantasy. I was never really into like Tolkien-esque fantasy, where it's all very heavy into world building and everything. But yeah, it's always kind of been some lighter fantasy and sci-fi traditionally. But recently, I've been kind of getting into reading like history and encyclopedias and stuff. Um, because I feel like I'm kind of ignorant about a lot of things that go on in the world and the history of a lot of the world, and I think it's worth kind of learning about that stuff, even if it's just so I can do a better job, kind of having a wider breadth of knowledge when I'm trying to critique something or when I'm trying to make something myself. But the second part, do I articulate myself so well because of reading? First of all, thank you. But also, I'm not sure. Again, that's a bit of a chicken and an egg conversation because I'm not sure if I read a lot because that's what I'm interested in, or if that's what I'm interested in because I read a lot as a kid. Um, I think the main thing that I would say is that I don't think you need to read a lot of like books to be able to articulate yourself well. With the internet, like watching videos and reading tweets from clever people and stuff like that, I think that's a decent way to kind of broaden your horizons a bit. Not that tweets are a replacement for like a good book. Don't misconstrue me here. I'm just saying I think now more than ever, reading books is not essential to having a robust vocabulary. Um, but what I would say is if you're interested in reading more, it needs to come from a place of joy. Don't sit there and force yourself to read shit and make yourself miserable. Like, oh fuck, I'd rather be doing anything else than reading this, but I want to seem clever, because that's a trap I've fallen into a few times. But yeah, it needs to come from a place of joy. Reading should be joyful. It's something that I've been meaning to get back into kind of more regularly. My reading's been a bit spotty recently, just like kind of the last couple of years, and it's something I really need to get back into myself. Lass Haley asks, who is your favourite teacher in school and why did you like them? Love and well wishes from a patron. First of all, thank you very much. The meme kind of dictates that I say Mrs. Fitzsimmons here, but if I'm being honest with you, it was my advanced higher English teacher, Mrs. Wiley. She always had a reputation of being strict, and I never had her like growing up, like going through the school. But in the last year, I got her, and she was magical. She was like this wee woman who, even at the time, like stood like a head lower than me. She would sweep into the room, and she had such a presence. She would sweep into the room, and she would declare herself with "Hello, peeps," and it was really cool. Like it was like it immediately kind of grabbed your attention. But the thing about her is that she wasn't this strict teacher that like people had been describing her as. She just expected some kind of like interest from her students. That's all she wanted. She didn't need you to be absolutely 100% correct about everything. She just needed like a bit of enthusiasm. And like that was a magical class. She introduced me to Lanark, to Alistair Gray. She introduced me to Yeats. She introduced me to Oscar fucking Wilde. It was amazing. But yeah, it was a couple of years ago. I found out that she had died. And so, this is my little tribute, I suppose, at the end of a overlong Q&A. But yeah, no, like R.I.P. Mrs. Wiley, one of the best. And with that, I've finally run out of questions. Thank you to everybody who asked a question. And like I say, sorry if I didn't get around to yours. It was just, I just didn't have a good answer for some of them. To reiterate, I will be back ASAP with more videos. I'm not giving up on this. And if I ever get to the point where I think I need to stop this, you will know about it, and I'll let everybody know about it, and I will let patrons know about it well in advance, so you're not continuing to give me money for something I'm not doing. Look, real talk. 2020 has been an absolute nightmare, I think, for all of us. And I just want to say, seriously, for all my patrons, for everybody that has shown any kind of a fucking interest in my videos, even if it's just to leave a like, even if it's just to watch it for 20 minutes or something, seriously, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I really, really appreciate the patience and the support that I've been shown. I really would like the 2021 videos on this channel to reflect the amount of time I spend thinking about this and planning things for this and energy spent on this. And I know for a fact that that's me. I'm going to have to make some changes in my lifestyle to bring about that change. And I'm determined to do that. But nevertheless, I'm still extremely grateful for all your patience with me. I also want to say, I hope you're all doing well, and I hope you're all keeping safe. I know it's been a nightmare, but still, you deserve a break. Happy holidays. And I'll see you soon, I guess. That's a bad ending. What a limp ending. Like, after all that, that's all I've got. Just